We are more tethered to the spirit realm than we think. As a scientist, I never believed in folklore. To me, they were just made-up stories meant to get little kids to behave. But everything changed on September 18th, 2023, when Sherry and I received an email about our next research location. Now, as I sit in my cell, waiting for a murder trial that's less than 19 hours away, I'm left with no choice but to tell you my side of the story because no one seems to believe me, not even my lawyer. What I saw on Sentinel Island still haunts me till this day. It was a calm Saturday afternoon. Sherry and I met for ice cream. We hadn't seen each other since our last expedition, and we decided it was time to catch up. The texts weren't enough. We spent the next 4 hours talking about everything: work, relationships, future plans, and random things I can barely even remember. It was the best 4 hours I'd had in a long time. But eventually, we had to call it a day. It was getting dark, and neither of us wanted to be out that late. So we hugged and said our goodbyes. My Uber arrived shortly after. I hopped in and ended up having one of the most mind-stimulating conversations ever. The driver was a middle-aged European man, kind and soft-spoken. I usually don't enjoy talking during rides, but he was different. Not just because of his demeanor, but because he actually seemed interested in all the research-related stuff I was rambling about. Turns out, he had once worked as a research assistant to an ecologist. Why did you quit? Was it the constant travel and time away from family? I asked, genuinely curious. But all he said was, "You'd never understand." I found that oddly dismissive, disrespectful even. I've worked as an ecologist for at least 6 years. What could I possibly not understand? Still, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. We were strangers after all. The remaining 10 minutes of the ride were uncomfortably quiet. Just before dropping me off, he looked at me and said sternly, "Take care. Be careful." I nodded, murmured a quick thanks, and stepped out of the car. As I walked away, I couldn't help but think, what an awkward ride. When I got to my apartment, I picked up my phone to text Sherry to see if she'd gotten home and maybe tell her about my good-looking but weird driver. But then I saw 2 missed calls from her, a couple of texts, and an email from my institute. I quickly read the email, and suddenly, Sherry's messages made sense. I called her back, and we spent the next 15 minutes complaining about the work email we'd received. We had a 17-hour flight the next day, something about researching Whistler's Cradle. It sounded poetic, but I didn't read the whole brief. All I knew was that I had to pack and get some rest. The next morning, we were at the airport. It was Sherry, Dr. Liz Aparicio, the biologist, and I. We boarded the flight, and I spent most of the journey reading the full research brief. I was excited. Being called to investigate such a rare phenomenon was an honor I couldn't wait to begin. From my initial research, a quick Google search, I learned that we were being sent to a dark forest hidden deep within a forbidden island. Satellite imaging had detected unusual heat signatures in the area, patterns that didn't match any known natural activity. That was why we were heading there, to make it all make sense. And I was up for the challenge. We had arrived late, and everything after landing was a blur. I dropped my bags and crashed almost instantly. A knock on my door woke me the next morning. It was Dr. Liz. She told me I had 30 minutes before we headed out to the main area. We also needed to set up camp, so we had to be there early. 30 minutes sounded like enough time. I'd prepared for crazier situations in less. Sherry and I met in the waiting room just as Dr. Liz walked in with a man beside her. She introduced him as Rahul, our local guide. He was there to lead us through the forest and fill us in on all the important details. Less than an hour later, we were out with our camping kits, heading toward the forest. Dr. Liz and Rahul deep in conversation about things I didn't really think concerned me. Meanwhile, Sherry and I rambling about the most random topics. After what felt like an eternity of navigating the thick forest, we finally arrived. I glanced at my smartwatch. Unsurprisingly, I had clocked a little over 11,000 steps. We had made it to the campsite. All that was left was to set things up, and so we did. The first day went smoothly. We discussed our plans for the next 5 days, and that was it. We prepared our minds for the task ahead. Unfortunately, nothing could have prepared us for the terror that awaited us the very next day. It was day 2, and the Earth Zone alarm clock woke us. No, it wasn't the birds or the hundreds of animal species in the forest. It was an earthquake. No one tells you how much more terrifying an earthquake is when you're deep in nature's core. The ground beneath us shook violently as animals screamed and scattered in every direction. We clung to a dipterocarp tree, holding on tightly, just waiting for the rumbling to stop. And it did, after about 45 minutes. But the damage it caused left us with less supplies. Our campsite was turned upside down. Our food supplies, clothes, and light sources, all destroyed. Worse, our guide was nowhere to be found. Dr. Liz mentioned he had taken an early morning walk to survey the area. We returned to the campsite to scavenge what we could find. Thankfully, it was enough to last us the next few days, if we didn't overeat and only used our headlamps carefully. Sherry and I had to share a tent now. Mine had been completely obliterated. She was like my best friend, so I didn't really mind. Hours passed, and there was still no sign of our guide. At that point, we knew we wouldn't be staying much longer. We decided to spend one more night, and if there was still no sign of him by morning, we'd head back. The second night was strangely hot, almost as if hell itself had opened up. It was weird, considering the night before had been so cold we could barely sleep under our blankets. At exactly 1 a.m., we heard a faint whistling sound in the trees. It was subtle, almost like a wounded animal crying out in pain after the quake. But the earthquake hadn't just disturbed the forest. It unleashed something inhuman. The next morning, day 3, we set out to search for Rahul. He never returned. We were all worried, but even more concerned for our own safety. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no clue how we were going to get back to the hotel. Some of our supplies were missing. I was certain they had been there the night before. Now, they were gone, including our phones and laptops. But that was the least of our problems. We needed to find our guide and a way out. We set out early in the morning, and about 4 kilometers from the campsite, we stumbled upon blood trails. A few steps later, we found bloodied animal carcasses, arranged in strange patterns that resembled glyphs. A chill ran down my spine. We feared wild animals might be nearby, so we turned back immediately with one thought in mind: get out of the forest by any means possible. On our way back, Sherry suddenly screamed. She stood frozen, staring blankly to the east. We rushed to her, trying to get her to speak, but she just raised a trembling hand and pointed. And then we saw it. Rahul's lifeless body, brutally mutilated, lay among the leaves. He was covered in deep scratch marks, too large to be human. We hurried quietly back to camp to pack all we needed to make a way back to our hotel. Neither of us remembered our way out of the forest, so we walked around in circles till nightfall. With no other choice, we made our way back to our campsite to spend the night and re-strategize. The 4th night was just as unbearably hot as the one before. And just like clockwork, at exactly 1 a.m., the whistling started again. Sherry and I held on to each other tightly until we eventually drifted off to sleep. By morning, we were just grateful to see sunlight again. But something felt off. We had woken up on our own. Dr. Liz usually did that. Could she have overslept? Worried, we headed to her tent, and that's when we saw it. The fabric had been slashed from the inside, and just outside the opening, a trail of blood. After a long, tense moment of indecision, we chose to follow it. Right beside the blood, we noticed a second set of tracks. Footprints, small, clawed, childlike. They led deep into the forest, and then suddenly stopped. In shock, I turned to see if Sherry was witnessing the same thing I was, but she was gone. I called out her name. No response. Where did she go? We had left camp together. She had been walking right behind me. How could she have vanished so suddenly? I looked around again and realized just how far we'd wandered from the campsite. I sat beneath a tree, unsure of what to do next. Hope was slipping away. It was getting dark again, and the last thing I wanted was to be caught wandering this cursed forest at night. So I curled up under the tree in the cold, praying I could survive just one more night. That's when I heard it again, the whistling. Only this time, it was closer than ever. I looked up, and for the first time, at dusk, I saw it. A twisted, emaciated figure, no taller than my waist. Thinking it was just a raccoon, I threw a twig at it. It scurried off, and for a brief moment, I thought I was safe. But when night fell, The whistling returned, sharper, louder, and before I could gather my thoughts, I was being dragged through the forest. I screamed with everything I had, but it was useless. No one was coming. Eventually, my voice gave out. My strength faded. The dragging finally stopped after several head bumps and torns lodged into my skin. I was bruised all over, aching and afraid. They had pulled me to the heart of the forest. There I saw a hollowed stump encircled by crude wooden idols, figures of something I vaguely recognized. Labubu. I had seen them once on TikTok, marketed as creepy cute collectibles. But these weren't cute, they were horrifying, twisted, alive. Hundreds of them surrounded me, their eyes glowing, all watching. Matted fur, long fingers, sharp jagged teeth, and its enormous black eyes, unblinking, stared at me almost curiously. That's when I realized the glyphs we'd seen, they weren't warnings. They were maps, leading to the Well of Forgetting, an ancient pit said to hold the first Labubu, a malformed, monstrous giant that ruled over the others. I had two choices, descend into the pit or be hunted like the others. I couldn't run, I was too weak, so I went down. In the suffocating dark, I came face to face with it. The first Labubu, a hulking skeletal thing with glassy blind eyes and 1,000 tiny hands. It didn't speak. It only pointed to a rusted machete. Then, from the shadows came a voice. Appease us. As I raised the blade, about to carve the offering it demanded, one of the Labubu stepped forward. It stopped me. Without a word, it pulled me from the pit and led me far away from the dark. When we finally reached somewhere safe, the Labubu turned to me and spoke. Esther, it's me, Sherry. I froze. The voice was hers, soft, familiar. But the creature standing before me looked nothing like Sherry. Of course it didn't. I stood there trembling, confused, horrified. She looked at me, pleading. Run, hide until dawn, don't look back. They can't survive in the light. It kills them. Then I heard them, shrieking, hundreds of them, closing in. They knew I had escaped. Without hesitation, Sherry turned and ran toward the swarm. She went to fight for me, to buy me time, to kill as many of them as she could. But deep down, we both knew it was a lost battle. That was the last time I saw her. Somehow, I survived the night. By morning, the legion of Labubu had vanished, burned away or retreated in fear. The light did kill them. I lay on the cold ground, barely conscious, barely alive. Then, in the distance, I heard voices. Hello, is anyone there? A rescue team. I stumbled toward the sound, every step heavier than the last. And just as I reached them, I collapsed. I don't remember what happened next, but I woke up in a hospital bed, disoriented, my body aching. 2 police officers stood just outside my room. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't. I was chained to the bed. A few minutes later, they came in to question me. At first, I thought it was routine, until I realized they weren't looking for answers. They were building a case. They thought I had murdered my team. I'm no detective, but the way they spoke, the way they looked at me, it was clear. I was the only suspect. I tried to explain what happened out there. The creatures, the earthquake, the disappearances, Sherry, but none of it mattered. They said I was delusional, that I was making it all up. It's been over 14 months now. Every piece of evidence they claim to have, all of it, still points to me. I didn't kill anyone. I would never hurt Sherry. She was my closest friend. But in the end, it's just my word, against whatever story the forest told them. I know it all sounds crazy, but Labubu is real, and they are in no way cute creatures.